Welcome to I Love This Thing So Fricking Much, a podcast about passion. My name is Sophie Katz, and today I am joined by Ryan, a mechanical engineer and mediocre cyclist. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Hey, Sophie, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. So, here's how this works. Ryan will have 3 minutes to talk about something that he loves. This can be a person, place, thing, concept, activity, anything he wants. Our only requirement is that he loves it wholeheartedly and wants to tell us why. Are you ready, Ryan?
I'm ready.
Good. Got my timer here. Now, what do you love so fricking much?
I love professional cycling grand tours. There are 3 of them that take place every summer. One's in Italy, one's in France, and one's in Spain. There are other races throughout the year too, but these are the most difficult and get the most media attention. Typically, there are 21 stages, including a team time trial and an individual time trial. There are usually 2 rest days in there, and most of them were founded in the early 1900s, so they've been going on for quite a long time. Pure endurance is just insane, doing 21 days of racing, and they're typically around 100 miles per day. So there's a lot of strategies about fueling and maintaining your ability to continue racing that whole time, as well as when you peak. So they try to get their best riders in peaking kind of midway through, so they're not too early or they're not too late. To only focus on the distance, though, misses a lot of the fun throughout the stages. While most endurance sports are individuals, there's a lot of team tactics and strategy that go on in the grand tours. So typically different stages, they'll favor different kinds of riders. So if there's a lot of mountains, they typically favor some of the smaller, thinner guys who are able to get more power for the amount of weight that they're carrying. You'll have flatter stages that are more geared toward sprinters who just have a flat out speed that's crazy high. And on top of all of the racing, I think the media is just great. So the commentators have a ton of time to fill during all the biking. They typically discuss historical and archaeological notes of the regions where they're passing through. There's a podcast I like called the Cycling Podcast. Shout out to them. They do an episode per stage that talks about the cities and the regions, some of the food from their meals the night before, and just related cycling history as they go along. Today, they're very corporate and well organized, but early on, they're sort of hilariously informal. So you'll see there's footage of cyclists napping by the side of the road or running inside of stores to just grab bottles of wine and pastries and shove in their jerseys. And that would create a bit of a hassle for the teams to figure out how much they owe the various cafes along the way. But I think the history is just fun and interesting. And there's pieces of European history along the way. And
go ahead and finish your thought.
These races have just managed to keep going despite everything that's happened along the intervening years.
That's awesome. Thank you for telling us about professional cycling grand tours today.
Yeah.
So how did you first get interested in this kind of race?
Yeah, my uncle owned a bike shop for a good deal of my life. And so we would hang out there growing up. And I think that got me into bike racing in the first place. In particular, grand tours, I think it's just something that, like I said, it gets the most media attention. I think they're just the most fun to follow of the whole racing season. So yeah, I've been into bikes, started with my uncle and have followed it from there.
You mentioned the media attention before as a big part of what you liked about it. You have the commentators and the podcasters. Talk a little more about that.
There's just a huge demand for any sports these days to get as much content as possible.
Mm-hmm.
They recently created a series about the 2021, I forget the year, but one of the recent Tour de France events. And there's some question among commentators about how much are they playing up certain drama between riders and how much of it is real feuds. So there's always people with hot takes here and there. You're just part of sports these days. I think it's fun to follow, even if some of it is beef that's not totally always there.
It sounds like there's almost a reality TV element to it all.
There is a bit, and there's a lot of strategy about communication. So riders, especially the leaders or stage winners, will give interviews after the stage, and there's always analysis of, oh, they said they're feeling good, but they didn't look like they're feeling good at the end of this race. Do they mean it? Are they trying to intimidate other people? All kinds of, you can dig as deep as you want. I think it's fun. You know, they happen 3 times throughout the summer, so you get as much weight you can.
You mentioned that there's a lot of interesting history, and certainly it's been around since the early 1900s, so I can only assume there are lots of fascinating stories. Can you share a couple things from the history of these cycling grand tours that you find particularly interesting?
Yeah, I don't have a great example, but just to have kept going throughout world wars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just fascinating.
How about this? Why do you think that interest in this race and this race at all has lasted this long? Because that is well over 100 years at this point.
I think it's something you learn how to do early on to ride a bike. A lot of people do it. A lot of people do it at different activity levels. I think the more you ride, the more you realize just how incredible the feat it is to be able to, what they're riding. I mean, you ride up a little hill and you start sweating, and these guys are going up mountains day after day. I think it's just something that it's so relatable in a way and is so incredible in another way, that the level of competition that they're able to maintain.
I think a lot of people feel like that when they watch like the Olympics or some other massive sporting event where it's like the best of the best doing it. There's this element of like they make it look so easy, anyone could do that, but also you have to remember that, oh my God, I could never do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Just this weekend, I was out on a bike ride and there was a group that took off, and I was trying to keep up with them and trying to keep up with them. And just eventually I couldn't. And I think we were probably going 20 or 21 miles an hour, which is pretty average day on these 100-mile races, for 20 days in a row. Yeah, it's just incredible.
How long out of the day are they racing?
It's usually a couple hours. There's something like 100 miles a day for 20 or 25 miles an hour.
So that's easily 4 to 5 hours straight of biking.
Yeah.
Wow.
The exceptions would be the two time trials. So the team time trial, it's the whole team gets the fastest time of the last person across the line. So people are working with your team, trying to get across the line and draft and be efficient. The individual time trials, it's really just one guy against himself and his own mind. And so those are typically significantly shorter, but much harder racing because you're going all out for that distance rather than using a group to coast a little bit and really only using your energy near the end of the race.
Is there anything that you don't like about professional cycling grand tours? And if so, how do you handle that?
Not a ton that I don't like. I would say there's sort of a stain on the sport from all of the doping and other things that went on in the early 2000s that I think it's hard to get off. And so anytime you have a stage or a whole tour where somebody just looks incredible far above the rest of the field, there's always a question lingering there of, well, did they do it cleanly or is there something fishy going on? And, that's just a shame. You wish that wasn't the case and we could all just be impressed by individuals' performance. I maybe naively think it's better. The situation is better than it was back again in the early 2000s. But yeah, it's just something that you never know. And you kind of wish that you didn't have to think about.
And that's another thing that it seems like all big televised sports you have to deal with.
Yeah, these days for sure.
So you mentioned there are 3 races over the course of the summer. If you had to pick one of them, just one to be the one that if you miss the other one's fine, but don't miss this one, which one would you pick?
For myself, I love the Giro d'Italia, which is the first one that takes place in Italy. Each one's got a little bit of a different vibe. The Giro d'Italia has a bit more, it's just a little more chaotic. It's a little bit less well organized. The stages tend to be a little bit longer. It's the springtime in Italy. So some of the mountaintops have a ton of snow on them, and it's just interesting scenery. I think for the general public, the Tour de France is the best one to pay attention to just because it's the best known. It's going to have the most media, that is easiest to follow. If you want to kind of get into it and learn some of the rules, that's definitely the place to start.
Ryan, thank you so much for telling us about something you love today.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad to share.
And thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today. If you would like to learn more about professional cycling grand tours or our guest Ryan, you can find his social media information in the episode description. And if you have something you love so freaking much you want to tell me all about it, consider this your invitation to join the show. I Love This Thing So Freaking Much is a production of Through the Window Media. This episode was directed and edited by Sophie A. Katz. You can find us at Through the Window on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or Tumblr. That is THROU the Window at all those social media sites. Be good to yourself, be kind to each other, and you'll hear from us again soon.